Dawn's on Me. I am Dawn Kirk, and I am here today to talk with Gordon McLaughlin, who is running for his second term as our district attorney for the 8th Judicial District. And if you are like a lot of people, you might not have a lot of information yet about what the DA does. It's a term that you've heard, you've probably voted for, but you might not know what all is happening in the DA front. So I'm excited to get to learn more. Gordon, would you like to tell us more about yourself and about your job?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on today and talk a little bit about the office. I'm a career prosecutor. I started my career in Eagle County as a prosecutor, and then was a deputy district attorney here in Larimer County for quite a few years before I decided to run for DA back in the 2020 election. But I've been interested in public service for a long time. My grandfather was in the State Department and was always really dedicated to public service. And my mom founded a cancer resource center back where I grew up. And so I came from a family of folks that really found giving back to the community really important. And so when I went to law school, I knew that was where I wanted to focus, was to find some place that I could really do well by my community. And in law school, I went to CU. And I interned at a district attorney's office, and I also participated in the criminal defense clinic, and so represented indigent clients in Boulder County, and so served on both sides of the criminal justice system there in law school. And both sides are really, really important. We need both sides to be functioning well and to be well represented. It's the base of our democracy is a functioning criminal justice system, and people agreeing on how our society should be governed and what laws we should have here. So I feel really passionate about both sides, but the difference in the district attorney's office is the search is for the truth. So you're not representing individual clients one by one as defense counsels are and looking out for their best interests. But in every case we handle, I'm looking out for the best interests of all 370,000 people in Larimer County. And so really representing the public. And so being able to represent everyone and to look for the truth in every case is a really powerful and rewarding way to get up and go to work every day. The district attorney prosecutes really all crime that occurs in Larimer County. And I'm actually the district attorney for the 8th Judicial District, which is technically Larimer and Jackson County. So I also represent the folks up in Walden and North Park up in Jackson County as well. But Larimer County is far and away, the population base that we have here in the 8th JD. So we prosecute almost all crime in Larimer County, and that's everything from a small level speeding ticket all the way up to a homicide. There are some very, very sort of small minor subsets of things that might go to a city attorney's office, and some very large sort of multi-jurisdictional things that might go to the U.S. attorney or attorney general. But really, we're responsible for handling 99% of the cases. And we have a lot of power and discretion in how we do that. And that means there's a lot of power to do the right thing and a lot of power to do the wrong thing. So how we handle our day-to-day work, what our values are, what our priorities are, and whom we are or not looking out for can be really important in how the administration of justice looks like in any individual community. Because every case that comes into our office, we have the power to do everything from dismissing that case all the way up to prosecuting that case, taking it to trial, and asking for a maximum sentence. And everything in there is the discretion of the district attorney. And so my deputy DAs at our office are looking at every case on a case-by-case basis, looking at victim needs, looking at defendant needs, and trying to figure out what makes sense for the community. When I ran 4 years ago, my philosophy was that criminal justice does not have to be at odds with social justice. So what that means is what we do, of course, on a day-to-day basis is criminal justice. And my responsibility as district attorney is keeping the community safe. But how we do that can look a lot of different ways. And when we look at really what's going to put the community in the best position for this crime not to happen again, what we call in criminal justice reducing recidivism, often that's not putting someone in jail for 10 days or even 10 months or 10 years. Often that might be getting that person access to resources to address the root causes of crime that got them in there. And a lot of that is behavioral health based, and I think we'll get more into that in a minute. But, certainly there are some segment of folks that we do still incarcerate for various reasons. And a lot of that has to do with community safety and victim safety and the severity of that crime. But the far majority of folks, and we prosecute about 12,000 cases a year here in Larimer County, the far majority of folks are folks that are good people that have made a mistake, or people that need access to resources, education, treatment to make sure that they are not repeating those mistakes. Because almost everyone, even someone serving a pretty long prison sentence, will be back in this community at some point. And so we want to make sure that we're setting the community up for success. And often that entails making sure that defendant is set up to be a contributing member of the community.
The first thing you said that I wanted to jump into was really the fact that you had that kind of full span of doing both defense and DA, because I've heard that over and over again, that when you have that perspective, it is informative in a way that like nothing else is. You can go through all the classes in the world, but working with people firsthand and being on both sides and really getting to see that full picture gives you an insight that you just can't study. And so I'm glad that you've had that. Not everybody has. And when that's missing, I think it really does show up, especially in what you're talking about, that root cause piece. Because without it, it is much easier to see crimes as a standalone thing that we need to deal with, and that's where I hear, a lot of that conversation around, well, we've just got to prosecute and we've got to, go heavy handed, because when you look at something in isolation, it's much easier to do that. But when you're looking at it from a human side, it changes the story.
I couldn't agree more. Making sure we're looking at the full picture is really, really important. So when we see anyone, whether that's a victim or a defendant, that's often on one of the worst days of their lives. And it is incredibly difficult to deal with the criminal justice system. And we have a really robust victim services department with victim advocates whose mission is to make sure that we are treating victims with respect. We are navigating with victims through the system. We are getting them connected to resources. We are taking their opinions in cases very seriously. But we also need to recognize that defendants are going through a lot sometimes in this system as well. And so making sure that we understand some of that and understand that the district attorney's office, we're really a downstream actor. And so there's a lot of societal issues that come to our doorstep. And we're not always the best position to deal with all those with the tools we have in the criminal justice system. And so making sure that we are reaching out and really collaborating with all sorts of other actors in the community. Some of those are county actors, like the new Longview Behavioral Health Facility that our county has built between Fort Collins and Loveland. Some of that is collaborating with law enforcement actors to build task forces to better address systemic problems. Some of that's collaborating with our nonprofit partners to better support victims and support those going through homelessness or suffering with a food crisis or something else. So we've really reached out and tried to collaborate and build partnerships and build these other avenues that not only can we point people to when they do come to our door, but hopefully that will divert people away from us before we ever see that case. And making sure that all of our staff, our attorneys, but also our advocates and our investigators and everyone else at our office is really looking at that holistic perspective is really important. So we've hired a lot of deputy DAs from around the state and really around the country that have worked in other DAs offices, that have done criminal defense work, that have done other civil work, that have been involved in the nonprofit world, so that we can really build a strong team that is looking at, again, the entire best interest of the community instead of operating at that one speed only, let's prosecute to the fullest extent mantra that has historically existed in district attorney's offices. And we're also trying to get out in the community a lot more. So the district attorney used to be just very closed in the behind the courthouse doors. And that's not a great way to understand the community and understand what different populations are struggling with and are faced with in Larimer County. So I personally have gotten out in the community a lot, and so has our staff. We actually just did our first staff day of service a couple of weeks ago. where about 40 members of our office teamed up and went to various nonprofits on a Friday afternoon. And I was part of the crew that was at the food bank, and we were sorting carrots and potatoes, and we had people out front actually giving out the cold goods from the coolers to folks coming through the food bank and shopping. And I'd been there before, but not all of our staff had. And it's amazing how much is going on at the food bank, right? Like the level of need, even in a seemingly affluent community like Larimer County, is amazing. And they're putting out so much food and other supplies to folks there on a daily basis that it's a good reminder that, we can't be stuck in this courthouse, old school prosecution model bubble. We had other folks that were planting landscaping at Crossroads Safe House, the domestic violence advocacy group, and people all around the community. And so, really meeting people where they're at, whether those folks are defendants or victims, is incredibly important to making sure that we're being attentive, accountable, transparent public servants.
I will say that I've noticed that. So I've only been working in nonprofits for the last few years as well. So my vision doesn't go back as far as it does for some other things, but I've noticed a big difference in the time that you've been in office in that piece of not just the giving, which is always a good team building experience, and as you say, awareness experience, but also being part of community groups and a lot of that web of support that we have that is really unique in Larimer County. And I would say that before your time, I don't think that the DA saw that that was connected to their work. I think painting very broadly, but I would say that I've seen that huge change in just really being where we're solving problems and talking about that. And I think you may know this better, and I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't know it off the top of your head, but I know that there is a ton of research on how much the social programs save communities compared to the criminal justice system. And so when you're looking at things from a lens of wanting to be a good steward of resources, the criminal justice system is by far the more expensive option in almost every case to solve the problem. It doesn't mean it's the wrong one, but it is definitely one that has a lot more costs associated to it. And so when we think of changing things for the better and what results we get, for what it means to our society as a whole, when somebody is getting whatever they need, whatever that is that your office is working with them on, it makes a huge difference. So I just bring that up because I think that's one of those pieces of information that we've been told something so different in all these ways that it's weird to me when I look at how much less it costs to do so many other things. And so it's
Yeah,
worth
no,
mentioning, right?
that's spot on. I mean, again, that gets back to sort of social justice is community safety. If we are getting someone treatment for addiction before that addiction devolves into distribution and theft and other things, then we have headed off a criminal problem through doing something that is more just and equitable by getting them treatment. I mentioned the Longview facility, and that's really a great example of this collaboration and this sort of diversion before the criminal justice system. One of the things that really inspired me to run 4 years ago was the ability to use the district attorney's office as a bully pulpit to try to help solve some of these other issues and to try to explain that these are community safety issues. And so we need to be funding those things. And as a lot of folks will remember, the first year that Longview facility was on the ballot, the bond initiative, it failed because people didn't understand how expansive and reverberating things like addiction and mental health were. And it really took a lot of folks, Commissioner Shattuck McNally was one, but many other people that really pounded the pavement for that initiative. And all our criminal justice leaders at that time were silent on the need for that facility. And so that's something that I think is important to use my voice as the district attorney, as the chief law enforcement officer, to explain to people why these things are so important and what the nexus is between those things and keeping our community safe. And then, as you said, incarceration is by far the most expensive option. And so it's your classic ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And
Mhm.
so we can put some dollars into behavioral health treatment, and those are going to save us many more dollars down the road. I'm also on the both our statewide opioid abatement board through the Attorney General's office. I'm the district attorney appointee statewide to that board, and I'm also on our local opioid abatement committee for the Larimer County region as the law enforcement expert on that board. And what both of them are geared towards doing is treatment and education. And making sure that we are trying to prevent some of these problems. And so, of course, most of the folks on these boards are not in criminal justice. They're in other nonprofit and mental health and addiction treatment spaces. But it's important to have that perspective, and it's important for me to take that information back and share that with the community. So I know our local Larimer Region Board over the last 2 years, the first two cycles that we've had this opioid abatement settlement money, we've given out $5.5 million just here locally towards essentially treatment and education. And folks don't know the dangers of really fentanyl. And fentanyl is the new wave of the opioid epidemic. It is more available, it is more lethal, and it is cheaper than opioids have ever been. And it's killing an amazing amount of people in our community. And we're doing a lot that I can share as well from the prosecution end to make sure that we're doing our part to stem the tide and hold dealers accountable. But from the user end, we need to really be having the treatment resources available where there's no way for the DA's office to point those things. And so I've been a really vocal advocate for those things. We need to be educating our kids. Kids do not know how dangerous these things are. You know, when most of us, you or I, or probably most people that end up listening to this were kids, you know, someone hands you a beer or a joint underage, and that might not be a good idea, but it's probably not going to kill you.
Yeah, you
Someone
know what it
hands a kid
is.
a you know what it is, and it just doesn't have even a teeny little fraction of the lethality. Now they hand someone a fentanyl pill, and it could easily kill someone. The sort of catchphrase is "one pill can kill," and that is very much true. We see folks, even adult users, who might be using 10, 15 pills a day, and the next day they get a pill with a different composition that has more fentanyl, and it kills them.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about kids who don't have that sort of tolerance, that aren't that regular users, it's very easy for it to happen. Um, on the prosecution end, since I mentioned that, we have led the state in our collaboration and innovation on prosecuting distribution causing death cases. What that means is that when someone kills someone with fentanyl, that's a new crime called fentanyl distribution causing death. I went down to the Capitol 2 years ago and fought really hard to pass that law because fentanyl is just on a whole different scale. Fentanyl, even, you know, I compared it how different it was than, you know, alcohol or marijuana, even compared to prior versions of the opioid epidemic, it is just far, far and away different. And so dealers know that they are selling poison. This isn't just a drug that gets people high anymore. This is a poison. And so now when they are leaving victims in their wake, and those struggling with drug use issues are really victims of this epidemic, we're making sure we're holding them accountable. And we've filed more cases than any jurisdiction in the state has so far, not because we have more overdoses, we don't, but because we have led the way at the district attorney's office in collaborating with law enforcement, the coroner's office, our Northern Colorado Drug Task Force, and putting the resources in to investigate that. We've sentenced a couple of those cases already. One of them was just a couple of weeks ago, where a 15-year-old in Loveland was sold fentanyl by an adult who knew the person he was selling to was a kid and sold him fentanyl anyway, and it killed him. And we held him accountable. He got a very significant Department of Corrections sentence. We argued for that maximum sentence, and the judge ruled in our favor on that. And I met with the family on that case. I met with the family in prior cases, and they are so thankful that finally people are fighting for their lost loved ones who historically were just seen as drug abusers and forgotten by law enforcement and forgotten by the criminal justice system. But these are members of our community. These are our friends and family, and they deserve justice too. And people are preying on their addiction, which is what these dealers are doing now.
Mhm. Well, and that gets back to the cycle as well, right? Because when you know some of these stories, it's not just strangers who are struggling with this. You know, like there's a lot of people who end up addicted and using the street version of things because of addiction, not because, I mean, they're just average people, right? They're our neighbors and they're people we work with and things like that. So it is so important to go upstream. I actually do know one of the young people who died from one of the cases you prosecuted. And I forgot about that connection until just now. So I'm having a moment and I'm grateful that you did that work. It is one of those cases where we have strong intent, as you say, and that's where it changes the game. And also, the fact that we've got all these resources that we're putting in across the system to be dealing with all the different ways that we're challenged with opioid addiction in our area. We have the education piece, right? People using it who don't know better. We have the fact that it is where you don't think it's going to be. You've got the disconnect by generation. You've got, the youthful idea that it's fine. Everything is going to be fine. And then it isn't always. Um, the fact that we're getting resources out on, I can go to every one of our events in northern Colorado and I can get testing strips and I can get Narcan, and we're putting it all in places that a lot of other communities can't and haven't used that money. I really appreciate that you're using that wisely to get it where in the hands of people. As somebody who gave it to all my kids and they rolled their eyes and thought, I'm never going to need this. I don't care. I was like, you're going to take it and you're going to carry it and I don't care. I hope that they never need it, but I also am really grateful that they have it and that I have it and, that any of us can get it. So thank you for doing that work.
Yeah, harm reduction is important, and so we've worked with through the Opioid Council, but also independently as our district attorney's office with the Northern Colorado Health Alliance and other people to make sure that we're trying to get the message out there that we do support harm reduction because we want to help save lives. And so there's a law in Colorado that says if someone calls 911 to report an overdose, they have some legal protections. And so we're trying to get the message out there about that and let folks know that it is safe to call 911 because again, we want to save lives. That is an essential element of justice and of community safety is saving lives. So we want to be part of those solutions and be partners and work through these problems as they change. The fentanyl epidemic, it came about so quickly. You look at fentanyl seizures in northern Colorado here in 2018, 2019, it was a little teeny blip in the radar. And now that is the majority of our drug supply, the majority of what is causing overdoses. And it happened very, very quickly. And so, we can't just be in this, old school prosecution mantra where we're just going to lock all these people up that are using fentanyl and think that we're going to be able to address the problem. We have to be nimble. We have to adapt. We have to learn from our partners throughout the community about what this looks like on the ground, and really try to be creative with how we solve some of these problems. So, when it comes to the user end, we are really trying to make sure we are sending these users to treatment 10 times out of 10. We're focusing prosecution resources on those folks preying on the community. But making sure we have an understanding of that in our office so that we can separate those folks. And so harm reduction is one. Our whole staff's been trained in harm reduction, trained in Narcan use, and Northern Colorado Health Alliance passed out Narcan to all our folks. So a lot of our people choose to carry that, whether they have it in their desk or their car or whatever they do. I personally have it in my house. I can't imagine any circumstance where I'm ever going to need to use it, but that's sometimes when you need something like that the most. So it's good for folks to know how to use it, to carry it, but also just to understand those principles of harm reduction and how lethal and addicting the substance is when we're making case decisions that are really going to impact people's lives.
Yeah. So all of that is tied back to behavioral health, which I think is definitely an important thing to talk about a little bit more because we have something unique here. And the fact that you're part of this web of behavioral health supports, I think is really important. But it's also probably the most upstream thing, the most uncommon upstream thing in law enforcement. And so I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about that now that we have some good data on what we have to offer.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that behavioral health as a whole is the most challenging problem in criminal justice right now. Addiction spurred by fentanyl has been incredibly challenging. The deaths occurring have been challenging. The crime that it brings along when folks are distributing, it's associated with gun crime and gun violence. A lot of the large scale seizures that we've made here in Larimer County have not just been pounds of fentanyl, but have been all sorts of guns and unserialized weapons and things that really put our community at risk. And so, we take a hard line on those things as well. But mental health has been an equal challenge. And I think mental health struggles have really been on the rise for quite some time. But across our communities, the pandemic really escalated mental health challenges and addiction challenges too. But they've really escalated mental health challenges. We see more people in the criminal justice space that are struggling with really severe mental health challenges than we've ever seen before. And that's true across Colorado and the country. It's nothing unique to Larimer County. And so just like addressing the fentanyl epidemic and having to change and be thoughtful and compassionate about the way we're doing these things, we've had to do the same in the mental health space. We have what we call a competency docket that has really been a nation-leading model in how to address severe and persistent mental health issues. The very long story short is our state hospital, which deals with folks that are undergoing competency evaluations and competency restoration in Colorado, is just epically backlogged. It would take over a year sometimes for people to start their treatment at the state hospital. And that meant one of two things. That meant either they were just being warehoused in our local Larimer County jail for that year with almost no services, a loss of their freedom, no progress on the criminal case, no justice for a victim, nothing, just warehoused in a jail. Or it meant they had posted a bond, they'd gotten out of custody pre-trial, but they were not receiving enough services to put them in a better place to keep the community safe, or to improve their own lives. And so it was just an incredibly unjust situation. The state's actually paying $10 million a year as a fine for the consent decree judgment because they can't meet their timelines. And this has been going on and getting worse for years and years. And so we sat down and said, how can we solve this problem locally? So we started this competency docket where we took the folks throughout all divisions of the Larimer County courts and put them in one docket. And we bring in mental health professionals, nonprofit partners, and experts in those fields to try to really drill down, figure out what the problems are, and try to address them. Maybe this person needs housing. Maybe this person needs food. Maybe this person needs addiction treatment as well. And these are co-occurring disorders. And we get them, if it's safe to, out of custody so that the treatment is not occurring while they're in jail. And we're getting them that treatment early on. And so that's really doing two things. One is it's reducing unnecessary incarceration for folks with serious mental health issues. The other thing it's doing is often people are restored to competency through this process, which means we can continue to prosecute that. And that means that when appropriate, we do so and we can actually get justice for a victim on that case that never would have received justice before because that person never would have been restored or would have taken too long and timed out entirely of the system. And so that's been really successful. People have come from around the state and around the country to observe that model because we're really on the forefront of some of these problems. And we're trying to expand efforts in all sorts of other areas with mental health awareness within our office, and building those resources. So we're starting a veterans court, hopefully sometime this fall or winter. And that's going to be, I think, either the third or fourth veterans court in the state. And that's going to have, again, bringing in experts in that field, other veterans, people that can specifically relate to the challenges that those folks are facing in their daily lives. And when we do that, again, not only is it more just and compassionate for that offender, but it is going to help address those root causes and make sure that that person does not repeat that crime and therefore keep our community safer.
Well, and I love that because the entry points for veterans and all of the resources, there are a plethora of resources, and yet so many people don't know how to access them, or there's a barrier to accessing them, and that's sort of where it breaks down. Is that I didn't know, or the I'm waiting, and yet we have the ability to do something about that, right? So to be able to uh, address the unique needs, and also the fact that there's a volume that makes that uh, something that has to have our attention, I think speaks to the great need that we have to do that work. And so I'm really grateful as somebody who's tried to navigate that for my husband, and now that we've had 23, 24 years cranking out veterans, there's a huge volume. We're really dealing with the challenges that come up um, in a populated area from that. So I'm glad to know that we are connecting people where they need support. Um, I knew this was going to happen. I knew that there were going to be about a million things I wanted to ask you about because I do nerd out about this stuff, and I realize I might be the only one. Um, so I'm going to have you
We can
back
do
on.
a Yeah, we can do a part two come the fall.
Yeah, I really do want to, because you just opened the door on I don't know, 5 things I wrote down that I want to know about for work. And you're doing some really insightful things that I think we can also use in other places. And that's really exciting to me. So I'm grateful for what you're doing. It means a lot to me. Um, I I know that you're not doing an easy job, and to be able to do it with um, kind of the whole person view into it, and humanity is a really nice touch, um, because it is so important, as you say, to be taking care of these things to keep us safer, and to be taking care of the people who have been victimized, um, is really important. And also, our goal is to change the cycles, right? To stop these things from happening. And I think you're doing some things that are big evidence based, but not necessarily um, things that you see all the time. And so you're really creating some momentum by doing it here. And so I'm glad to see that as well. I'm glad to live in a place where that is true, and that we have the support systems in place to help pull this all together. So thank you for leading that charge and for taking this on when you did. It's a difficult time to take on anything in criminal justice, as well. And I appreciate that. And I do want to give a quick plug, since you are running for office. Um, if you have not yet filled out your ballot and you're listening to this before the primaries, you need to get that in. It is too late to mail them. So make sure that you are voting, and make sure you're planning on voting in November. And if you want to get involved, because there is a really important race for our district attorney's office, you need to get involved. Gordon has a website. Do you want to give a plug for the website so people can get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, please vote in the primary if you haven't yet. And spread the word. It's important to build that momentum going into November. And I do have a very conservative general election opponent that will be on the ballot in November, and so I definitely will need everyone's help here. This is really probably going to be the only competitive general election district attorney's race in the state, and so I know there's going to be a lot of dark money coming in this race. There was 4 years ago. There's going to be a lot more now that I won. I was the first Democrat to ever hold this seat, and they want to make sure I'm the only Democrat to ever hold this seat. So they're gunning for this statewide, and so we really need people to tune into this race. The website's McLaughlinforDA.com. It's McLaughlinForDA.com. And there, folks can volunteer to sign up. They can donate. And then I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at McLaughlin for DA. And so I'd encourage folks to follow along. We have an email list they can sign up for as well to keep learning about what we're doing. So we'd appreciate people's participation in any way they can, whether that's financial or knocking doors or just spreading the word with their friends.
Absolutely. Thank you for all of that. I know that if you're listening to this at this point, you probably are wanting to get involved and know where the energy needs to go. And this is a place that definitely is good to know what to tell your friends, to get them engaged, to get them taking action and get active. So thank you for all you're doing. And please get involved if you're listening to this, because we really do need to make sure that these great programs continue and that we build the momentum and change some of these cycles. So, thank you for everything. And thanks for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day if you're listening to this. Take care, and we'll see you the next time.
Paid for by the Larimer County Democratic Party. 2001 South Shield Street, Unit B3, Fort Collins, Colorado, 80526, 970-689-6391. Not authorized by any candidate or any candidate's committee. Andrew Yates, registered agent.